straight ahead in this hour's newscast. President Park Geun-hye once again stresses the importance of youth job creation and calls for coordinated efforts to achieve that goal. She also orders improved police presence in towns near the border in case of future North Korean provocations. An Cheol-soo and Jung-bae joined forces in their pursuit of creating a political party that can put the needs of the people first while going toe-to-toe against the ruling Saenuri party. The mercury has dipped way below zero in many parts of our world as massive blizzards white out many regions, causing deaths and leaving many unable to adjust to the sudden chill. Fortunately, a warm-up is in store this week. News Center begins now. Well, welcome to this Monday evening's edition of News Center. I'm Daniel Choi. President Park Geun-hye has stressed the need for collaboration and understanding from all sectors of society to help create more decent jobs for young people. At a meeting with her senior secretary, she also ordered the launch of a new regional police agency to better protect citizens from North Korean threats. Our Song Ji-sun starts us off.
Citing the umbrella labor union's boycott last week against tripartite negotiations with the government and management, President Park Geun-hye asked for joint efforts and cooperation to create new jobs for the youth. The government last Friday announced labor guidelines based on the agreement reached between labor and management in September last year. The landmark deal is aimed at making Korea's labor market more flexible by implementing the wage peak system and allowing companies to dismiss underperforming workers. Workers opposed the guidelines, with one of the two major unions going on strike on Monday. Park refuted accusations that the new norms are designed to create jobs through fair employment practices.
공정 인사 지침에 쉬운 해고는 전혀 없습니다. 오히려 기업들이 능력과 성과에 따라서 공정하게 평가를 하고 교육 훈련과 재배치 등 새로운 도전 기회를 제공하도록 기준과 절차를 제시해서 해고의 안전 장치를 만들고자 하는 것입니다.
She again stressed the related labor reform bills pending at the National Assembly must be passed to ensure reforms are realized. Monday's senior president secretary's meeting was the first of this year after the initial meeting was canceled following North Korea's sudden nuke test. President Park also addressed the need to establish a regional police agency in northern Gyeonggi-do Province to ease concerns of residents living close to the border in case of further provocations from the north. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, National Assembly Speaker Jung-hye has been having a tough go at trying to get rival parties to put their differences aside and focus on passing legislation. He held a press conference Monday urging lawmakers to restore balance before the 19th parliamentary session ends. Our Kim Young-gil tells us more.
National Assembly Speaker Jung-hye once again called on lawmakers to restore normalcy and the principles of democracy to Parliament. In a plea Monday, he asserted the need for amending the National Assembly Advancement Act in order to end months of political deadlock.
The current Assembly law has demolished the majority rule and adopted a 60% rule to pass bills. This is controversial as it can be seen as violating the Constitution.
Jung has proposed dropping the 60% rule to pass bills and bringing back majority rule, which would ease the requirements for fast-tracking legislation. Under current law, deadlocked bills can be designated as so-called fast-track items and be put up for a vote if 60% or 180 lawmakers consent. He also proposed introducing deadlines for the consideration of bills by the Legislation and the Judiciary Committee, under which a bill will be automatically submitted to the plenary session after 90 days of deliberation. But Jung remained staunchly against the idea of expanding the Speaker's authority to table contentious bills requested by the ruling Saenuri party.
Legislative paralysis cannot continue on into the 20th National Assembly, but it's also a dangerous idea to give the Assembly Speaker authority to put a bill up for a vote just because lawmakers make the demand.
The five-term lawmakers said the Speaker's power should be kept to a minimum at all times. The much-disputed Advancement Act was introduced back in 2012 as an effort to eradicate violent scuffles in Parliament by including compromise as part of the legislative process. Jung-bae, Arirang News.
Two former main opposition lawmakers, Cheol-soo and Jung-bae, reunited today as part of a new opposition bloc, the People's Party. The two vowed to stand up against the ruling Sanctions Party, but will it be enough to unite liberal voters? Our Shin Se-min has more on the duo's resolve.
Two minor opposition parties have merged, and a new coalition enters the rapidly changing political landscape in Korea. Independent lawmaker Cheol-soo of People's Party and Jung-bae of National Congress announced they will join for victory over the ruling Sanctions Party in the coming parliamentary elections in April.
We share a common belief that the coalition should work in the interest of the people, not the politicians.
The United Coalition upholds constitutional values and has a vision towards demographic reform.
The coalition forms amid growing concerns that division within opposition circles may further split the progressive voters in the lead-up to the general elections. Vowing to provide hope to the people, the new duo promised to unite with other lawmakers and attract more talent to the new party. The new coalition will remain as the People's Party, but the two politicians have yet to disclose specifics on the agreement or official launch date. The latest move by former main opposition party affiliated lawmakers, An and Chun, is bound to intensify the rivalry with Moon Jae-in, chair of the main opposition bloc Minju Party of Korea. A recent local pollster shows that Cheol-soo's People's Party has been struggling with faltering approval ratings of just over 17%, losing support in the strategically important Southwest or Honam region. Now, with the new teamwork, he's hoping to win back some of the voters as the political roller coaster is likely to continue in the lead up to the general elections. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has embarked on a tour of East Asia that will take him to China on Wednesday. He's set to meet with senior officials and press Beijing to play a more constructive role in punishing North Korea for conducting a nuclear test earlier this month. As our Connie Kim explains, difficult talks may be in store.
Topping U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's agenda this week will be pressuring China to impose heavy sanctions on North Korea following its fourth nuclear test. Citing a senior U.S. State Department official, Wall Street Journal reported Sunday, Kerry will make a final push to press Beijing, North Korea's longtime ally, to join the international community's move in slapping a new set of sanctions on Pyongyang. A U.S.-led United Nations Security Council resolution is being drafted, and Washington continues to emphasize Beijing's role and power to influence Pyongyang to change its course given their close trade and military ties. The senior official also underscored the importance of sending an unmistakable message to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un that his current strategy is making it difficult for China to side with the reclusive regime. Listing Beijing's efforts to prevent illegal activities through Chinese companies and ports, the official added there is much more room for further sanctions. Kerry will be reflecting Washington's stance on the matter as he ramps up the pressure on Beijing to impose independent sanctions on Pyongyang. The U.S. is mulling its own set of unilateral measures against the North, including penalizing third-party countries that do business with the regime, which would likely affect China as well. The senior U.S. official went on to blame North Korea for walking away from the six-party nuclear talks in 2008 and the opportunity to denuclearize with the support of the international community. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Most of the country is still bearing the brunt of temperatures well below freezing on this Monday, a day after Seoul shivered through its coldest day in 15 years. But according to our EG1, the weather is gradually easing, with flights to and from Jeju resuming operations as well.
The cold wave watch has continued for an 8th straight day in some parts of the country as Monday's temperatures remain low. According to the nation's weather agency, the Monday morning temperatures in Seoul was a bone-chilling minus 14 degrees Celsius, Daegu minus 11, and Busan minus 8. Korea's southern regions also received warnings of heavy snow in the morning, while a record 130 centimeters of snow piled up in eastern island of Ulleungdo. It's been 8 days since ships couldn't approach or leave the island due to strong winds and waves, causing the island to run out of daily necessities. But conditions are easing, with temperatures forecast to return to seasonal norms from Tuesday. Flights to and from Jeju-do Island are also back to normal from Monday afternoon, ending the 42-hour suspension for some 87,000 travelers stranded on the island. Korea isn't the only country braving the severe cold spell. A massive blizzard struck the U.S. East Coast over the weekend, and at least 19 people have died in storm-related accidents. A state of emergency has been declared in 11 states, and about 12,000 flights have been canceled. Washington, D.C. received 60 centimeters of snow, the second highest since 1922. And the federal offices in the capital will be closed on Monday. China also suffers from the harsh cold spell, with some northern provinces reporting seasonal lows of 48 degrees below zero. Hong Kong saw its coldest day in nearly 60 years on Sunday as the mercury plunged to 3 degrees Celsius. But the cold wave is expected to let up soon, with temperatures around the world forecast to return to seasonal averages this week. 이지원, Arirang News.
Frigid temperatures here in Seoul have most of us staying indoors and dreading the thought of stepping outside. But public workers in the city continue to get on with their jobs. Our Oh Soo-young brings to the spotlight these selfless men and women.
A team of firemen train outside in the cold, equipped with ropes and fire hoses. They're preparing for potential fires, which occur rampantly during the cool, dry season.
The cold is the last thing on my mind when I'm thinking about how to save a person in need. It could happen to anyone's family.
For postman Hong, it's a fight against the cold every day, as he delivers his parcels from house to house. He wears multiple layers and hot patches on his body to endure the bitter cold.
It's really cold, but I work hard every day because the residents are very kind and give me hot drinks. They warm my heart.
And in downtown Seoul, multilingual translators brave the city chills, geared up in red puffy coats, fur hats and cheery smiles as they greet tourists from all over the world, helping them make their way around town.
It's cold, but it feels good when people thank us for helping them.
Public workers in the capital are braving the cold to do their jobs, keep the city running smoothly, and help us weather the coldest days of the season. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Shifting gears to a different story now, South Korea raised its cyber alert level following an influx of malicious emails presumed to have originated from North Korea. The Ministry of Science, ICT and Future Planning raised the country's cyber alert one notch from the normal blue to the cautious yellow level on Monday, urging the public to install antivirus programs and refrain from opening the emails. The suspicious emails claimed to be sent from government organizations, including the Presidential Office of Jung-bae and Internet portal managers. The ministry says the emails could be part of organized cyber attacks following Pyongyang's alleged successful hydrogen bomb test earlier this month, citing similar attempts made by the North after its third nuclear test in 2013. South Korea has extended travel restrictions on 6 countries and some regions in the Philippines until this summer. Seoul's Foreign Affairs Ministry announced Monday that Korean nationals are prohibited from traveling to Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Libya, Afghanistan, and Somalia until the end of July. In the Philippines, restrictions will also be in place for Mindanao's Zamboanga, Sulu, Basilan, and Tawi-Tawi provinces. The ministry cited rising concerns of violence and terror threats coming from extremist groups. Travel bans for these countries were to expire this month. Despite being one of the wealthiest countries in Asia, Korea has the highest elderly poverty rate in the OECD. Making matters worse, a new study shows most old people struggling to make ends meet also suffer from so-called multidimensional poverty. Our Park Ji-won sheds light on this issue.
Nearly 7 out of 10 Korean senior citizens end up suffering from multiple layers of poverty. According to a recent study of nearly 3,000 senior citizens surveyed, 67.3% of them as of 2013 were defined as living below the poverty line in more than two criteria, such as income, housing, and health. In terms of income, a majority of seniors earned less than half of the nation's median income. A similar percentage also suffered from at least two chronic diseases or depression or have difficulty with physical activities. Many elderly also had a poor social participation rate based on their regular group activities. However, compared to figures in 2011, the overall numbers have improved. Research fellow Hwang Nam-hee, who led the study, says the reasons behind the improvement are not yet clear and could be the topic of future studies. She emphasized that the goal of her study was to show that more policies should be devised for helping senior citizens from a social aspect.
Most senior welfare policies centre around strengthening income, such as providing subsidies or basic pension. However, as this study shows, more policy interest should be given to senior citizens' depression rate or social participation rate.
The study was published in the latest edition of Pension Forum, published by the National Pension Research Institute. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
China's latest growth figures have further prompted concerns over slowing global demand here in Korea, where exports are the country's traditional growth engine. Our Hwang Ji-hye sat down with World Bank Vice President for East Asia and Pacific region to talk about the global conditions Korea faces.
After experiencing a rapid growth for more than a decade, now China is going through a painful slowdown recently, and this is coming from the government focusing more on domestic consumption over government investment. What's your take on the transition in China?
Well, this has been a transition that we anticipated, we have expected it. If you are growing 6.9%, and even the bank is expecting in this year about 6.7%, you are talking about a substantial increase of an economy. Think of the 6.9, that is about $700 billion, so that's quite substantive. I think we need to see in the transition phase which sectors are going to be more challenged, which are going to be growing. And what our advice has been is to focus on that.
Exports to China account for a quarter of Korea's total exports. How would this transition affect Korea?
Well, first of all, indeed, it is 25%. It's important. Let's also add that Korea has been very successful to have 75% elsewhere, including, for example, ASEAN, Japan, and the rest of the world. I would argue that the 25% is also an opportunity. First, you have a very strong presence in the Chinese market. Secondly, that transformation means also China will have a rapidly growing middle class. So what the interesting transition is, you will have some producers losing out, but there will be new demands in other goods. Electronics is going to be very important, but also all the technologies that are able to adjust quickly to new market trends. Korea has been successful over the last decades to adapt quickly to new trends. It's not about, unquote, predicting which is the next successful product, an iPhone or whatever. But I think what will be important is, does an economy and do firms have the capability of adjusting?
So what do you see in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of changes in the regional dynamics?
I think what is very important is that the center of economic gravity is increasingly moving to East Asia. There are major powers in the region, and Korea is, as also a very strong economic power, could be actually very good as an integrator. Also, Korea could make a major contribution given its own successful development trajectory. The relevant comparator for Korea is not comparing your growth performance with other developing countries. It is with more advanced countries. That is the league in which you are right now. And this year the aspirations are to be in the order of 3%. That would make Korea one of the fastest growing advanced economies in the world. And there, I think in relative terms, you have been doing well.
It's very interesting to hear that we are in the level of advanced economies. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Economic Forum in Davos. It's where the top political, financial, and academic elites, as well as social entrepreneurs, gathered to share ideas and opinions that could reshape our world, not to mention rub shoulders and expand their network and horizons. From the ultimate in security and technological convenience, our Moon Geun-young provides an inside look at what made this year's gathering go off without a hitch.
The World Economic Forum draws about 2,500 global leaders every year to the town of Davos, and about 1,000 journalists come to cover them. And with Davos being a very small town, with a little over 10 hotels or so, the rest of us get to stay in Dorf or clusters like here, a nearby town that's about 25 kilometers away from Davos Platz. Every morning, those who stay at clusters like myself hop onto one of these shuttles that takes me directly to the Congress Center. A half-an-hour ride up the picturesque mountain. The joy of riding the shuttle is knowing the next conversation will be just as interesting.
So the way that neurons act
Neurons? At Davos, yes, at and not in, you never know who you'll come across with what expertise. It turns out Sanjita Bhatia is an MIT professor of bioengineering. Quite an educational session, I must say. Taking the shuttle every morning and night is also a fascinating part of the Davos experience. The next stage of the process is to penetrate through the really tough security here at the Congress Center, which itself takes some time. Davos works with a caste system of badges that determine your access to talks, meetings, just about everywhere. Stopped. Holders of white badges have access to all official sessions as well as lunches, dinners, which are generally off the record. An orange pass with a purple line, the one my video journalist has around his neck, has very limited access. Once you get beyond the entrance control, you'll find the place swarming with world leaders, business people, academics, and the big names. Want to find out who runs the world? All you need to do here is to take a look around. Within minutes, you'll run into the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, President of Mexico Enrique Peña Nieto.
Hi, Mr. Secretary. Hi.
How are you?
And the US Secretary of State John Kerry. Beyond these movers and shakers, the World Economic Forum is still a conference. Let me use my high-tech badge and find out what I have lined up for my afternoon. Aha.
Special address by,
chaired by Professor Klaus Schwab, the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, Professor Klaus Schwab. It's this German economist who has made this high-powered talkfest a vital part of the business calendar for the world's political, financial, and academic elites every year for nearly 5 decades.
When you leave, the first wish, I hope you have made many friends here.
So the World Economic Forum in Davos is not just a conference, I suppose. behind the mega-tight security in this tiny town with one road in and out and no airport. It's where the world's most influential and the most powerful make friends.
The Islamic State has released a video praising the 9 men it claims carried out the fatal attacks in Paris last November. The video also appears to threaten another major city with an attack. With more, Bruce Harrison joins us in the studio. Bruce, aside from this being a very gruesome propaganda, as always, what does this video tell us about the Islamic State's operations?
Sure, Daniel. The fighters appear in this video with a desert backdrop, and that's significant because it would indicate the Islamic State trained and sent these people to Paris, as opposed to the terrorists taking the lead or drawing inspiration from the group, actually, and carrying out the attacks on their own. According to the New York Times, the video makes it clear the Paris attacks were not just inspired by the Islamic State, but carried out by core members of the group. The authenticity of these videos is questionable, although the latest bears the branding of Islamic State's media center. Flashpoint Global Partners is an organization that monitors militant social media, and it said the video appears to be the real thing. One of the attackers in the video says the West can expect the terror to continue.
Know that the Islamic State has sent you hunters who thirst for the blood of the disbelievers, hunters who will not hesitate to slaughter you.
The video also states that ISIS has plans to attack Britain, which shows images of politicians, including Prime Minister David Cameron, as they authorize military action against the Islamic State. Portugal has elected a new president who may provide the country with some much-needed political stability as its economy attempts to recover. A former journalist and one-time leader of the center-right Social Democrats, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, won 52% of the vote on Sunday, enough to avoid a runoff.
As president, I will do everything to bring the Portuguese closer, building bridges, healing wounds. We'll be stronger as we'll fight injustices and promote credibility and hope for the future.
The office of the president is largely viewed as ceremonial in Portugal, but Rebelo de Sousa's role may be very important amid the country's economic strife. He said he'll work to promote consensus and repair divisions created after the country's divisive parliamentary elections last October.
Now, the other story you brought for us, Bruce, I don't know whether to laugh or frown upon it. We talk about facial hair, something that you need to be very careful about when it's something that someone takes great pride in, especially when it's one of the most historic, one of the most famous beards in the world. The men who apparently mishandled Tutankhamun's masks are facing serious charges, obviously.
Yeah, the boy king's burial mask, the pharaoh's burial mask. Apparently these guys knocked off the beard. If convicted, they're facing gross negligence charges. They may have to pay steep fines. They could even lose their jobs at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo because of this. Apparently, the mask was scratched, and that's the bigger issue right now. When they tried to reattach the beard with epoxy last fall in a rather hasty attempt. According to antiquities expert, the beard wasn't firmly attached until 1941, but it had stayed in place for nearly 75 years.
And unfortunately, last year in August, it happens that during an attempt to change the light situation in the display case, the mask was touched and the beard fell apart.
The beard was finally reattached recently in a way that's apparently safer and reversible if necessary.
Again, it's a serious issue, but just too many jokes. And it's hard not to make fun of the situation. I can just see scenes from The Simpsons and The Three Stooges replaying in my mind as I reenact the two people who are trying to use cheap glue to bind it back together.
This mask is 3,000 years old. It's one of Cairo's biggest tourism draws, and apparently the employees on multiple occasions tried to reattach it, and yes, according to these experts, used cheap, improper glue to do it. And you can see close up on some of these photos the bad job they did. A very famous antiquity. Apparently now, though, finally it's being handled properly.
Right. They should have treated it with a little bit more respect than just convenience store knockoff glues.
Apparently.
Well, thank you so much for those stories today, Bruce.
My pleasure, Daniel.
Brutal cold conditions and heavy snow has gripped the Korean peninsula. Let's go to the Weather Center for some updates with our Ji-yeon. Ji-yeon?
Hello, Daniel. Yes, a deep freeze compounded by heavy snow in the Cheol-soo provinces and Jeju Ulleungdo Island caused many problems. And you know, we've had a very cold, dry Arctic air mass coming in with northwesterly winds. And when this air mass went over warm sea, it created heavy snow clouds, as we can see, and it dropped heavy snow to Cheol-soo regions, Jeju, and Ulleungdo received about 110 centimeters of heavy snow over the past 6 days. And as we take a look at the weather alerts that were issued on Sunday, my goodness, whole nation were gripped by the severe cold snap. Most of the extreme weather hit over the weekend with record-breaking temperatures and amount of snowfall. But thankfully, most of the weather alerts have been lifted and mostly dry air advisories are in place in some of the peninsula, including here in the capital. And temperatures will be slightly above the seasonal average, so let's take a closer look. A daily low will be still cold here in Seoul, kicking off at -7 degrees Celsius, -6 for Daegu, and -2 over in Busan. And daily highs will finally go above the freezing mark, topping out at 2 here in Seoul, 5 in Daegu, 7 over in Busan. And thankfully, temperatures will stay above the seasonal norms for the remainder of the month under a good amount of sunshine. Now that's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
One of those beloved super robots of Korea probably inspired many of the young scientists today who came up with robots like Hubo. Well, that's all we have for you on today's News Center. Do join us for more same time tomorrow. Thank you for watching.